Hey guys, tonight we're slipping into something deeply uncomfortable. Itchy wool, sweaty layers, and the relentless sun beating down on your back as you trudge barefoot through a summer morning in medieval Europe. You're not royalty. You're not even an apprentice. You're a peasant farmer. And this heat, it doesn't care that your entire livelihood depends on keeping things just barely alive. Chickens, turnips, your own skin, not necessarily in that order. You wake before the sun, but not before the heat. The thatched roof above you crackles gently with the stored warmth of yesterday, never quite cooling overnight. The packed earth floor beneath your straw bedding is damp but not refreshing, and the air feels heavy enough to chew. You sit up slowly, rubbing sleep and dust from your eyes, and you already smell like sweat, smoke, and something vaguely goat-like. No offense to the goat sleeping in the corner. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop your location and local time in the comments. I always love seeing where and when people are listening from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The day begins with a slap of reality. No coffee, no croissant, and definitely no air conditioning. You don't even have glass windows, just wooden shutters that barely keep the birds out. You swing your legs over the edge of your bedding and plant your feet in the dirt. Literally, your home has no floorboards. The air tastes like soot and sour milk. Your joints creak like the old barn door, and you're only 25, which in medieval peasant years is roughly ancient. Outside, the first rays of sun slice through the mist. Everything glows gold and green, dew steaming slightly as it evaporates from the grass. You'd appreciate the beauty more if it didn't mean the heat was already flexing its muscles. The birds chirp like they don't know what's coming. Pig grunts. Somewhere, a dog starts a fight with a wheelbarrow. You scratch your neck and wonder if lice can sweat. Your day starts with labor, because of course it does. Firewood needs gathering. Water must be hauled from the stream again, and it's a good 15-minute walk if your neighbor hasn't blocked the path with his angry geese. You grab a clay jug with a crack in it and head out, squinting into the glare of morning sun like a vampire with a hangover. And just like that, you're moving through a world where heat is not a nuisance. It's a survival test. No sunscreen, no hats with little fans, no icy lemonade stands. Just sweat, more sweat, and maybe a nice rash by lunchtime. You pass your neighbor Elfrida, already ankle-deep in her vegetable patch. She waves with a hand covered in something sticky and brown. You don't ask. The truth is, medieval farmers like you weren't just tough. They were heat-proof, or at least tried to be. Summer didn't come with holidays or beach trips. It came with blisters, sunstroke, and rotting food. Still, you press on, shoulders hunched against the already rising sun, and remind yourself that if you don't get to the fields before noon, the soil will burn your feet. You reach the stream, or what's left of it. More mud than water today, and warm enough to cook an egg in. A few frogs look up at you with judgment in their beady eyes. You dunk the jug and stir the bottom, hoping the grit settles before someone tries to drink it. Historians still argue whether villagers knew to boil water or if they just developed iron stomachs out of sheer desperation. Either way, you know this sludge is your best option. On your way back, the weight of the jug presses into your hip. Your shirt sticks to your back like a second skin, one made of scratchy burlap. Somewhere up ahead, you hear the village bell. It's not quite a church bell and not quite a dinner bell. More of a get-moving, lazy bones bell. The sound makes your spine straighten, even though no one's watching. You've been trained since birth to jump when it rings, even if it's 92 degrees out and you're carrying half the stream home on your shoulder. You pass the smithy, where the heat is somehow worse. The blacksmith is already hammering away, shirtless and shiny, like a very angry ham. He nods in your direction and wipes his forehead with the edge of his apron. The forge glows like the mouth of a dragon, and for a second you actually feel lucky to be a farmer and not him. At least your job comes with wind. Sometimes. Back home, the cottage smells like boiling cabbage and whatever died in the rafters. Your family is up, your mother already scolding the chickens, your younger brother picking his nose by the hearth. You hand off the water with a grunt and duck back outside before someone asks you to churn something. The sun's now high enough to stab at your eyes. Your only real defense? A wide-brimmed straw hat that looks like it's been stepped on by every member of the village, including the livestock. You adjust it and start for the fields, heart sinking as you see the distant shimmer of heat rippling over the crops. They look okay, for now, but you know how fast okay becomes crispy in a week like this. Your day has barely begun, and already you're drenched in sweat, slightly dehydrated, and wondering if that sore spot on your shoulder is just a muscle knot or the early signs of medieval sun poisoning. Yes, that was a thing. No, there was no ointment. Maybe a nice poultice. Maybe a prayer. And still, you go on, because this is your land. Or at least the Lord's land that you rent with grain and labor. And if you don't take care of it, your family doesn't eat. The cows don't eat. And that goat in the corner definitely doesn't eat. You glance back once more at the shade of your cottage. A trickle of cool air teases your cheek as you step into the baking path toward the field. The heat pulses against your skin, rising with each step, and you already miss the lukewarm mud water you hauled home earlier. Only 14 more hours until sunset. You've got this, probably. You pick up your pace, because once the sun hits its stride, even the soil turns mean. The earth is cracked and dust rises with each footstep, puffing up into your nose like dry flour. Your stomach rumbles, but breakfast isn't served. It's scavenged. And whatever it is, you're not sitting down at some quaint wooden table. You grab a crust of yesterday's bread from a cloth sack tied to your belt. It's hard enough to qualify as a weapon, but you gnaw it anyway. This early in the day, your tasks come at you fast. Gather the eggs, check the garden, inspect the thatch for leaks, though it hasn't rained in weeks, so it's mostly just checking that nothing's nesting where it shouldn't be. You shuffle toward the chicken pen, which smells like a hot diaper wrapped in hay and regret. The hens glare at you like you're late. One pecks your boot just to make a point. You collect a few warm eggs, wiping chicken dust off your fingers onto your tunic. Then it's off to the garden patch. Your vegetable plot is a few strides from the house, full of cabbage, leeks, maybe some fava beans if the season's kind. Today, the cabbages look like they've given up. Their leaves sag like they're melting into the dirt, and you know if they wilt now, they're done. You grab the watering pail, not much left in it, and give the most desperate plants a quick splash. It's more symbolic than useful. And that latrine? It's a hole in the ground behind some leaning boards. It smells like a bad decision made permanent. You make a quick stop, holding your breath, and try not to think too hard about the swarm of flies greeting you. This is the medieval version of morning routine. No face wash, no scented soap. You scrub your hands in a bucket that hasn't seen fresh water since last full moon and call it good. You pass neighbors doing their own routines, every movement slow but urgent. It's not laziness, it's survival. You conserve energy where you can. Even talking feels like work, but gossip still flows like tepid ale, especially if someone heard something scandalous at the well. Today's topic? Someone swears they saw the Reeve sneaking bread from the church tithe. Someone else insists he was just blessing it. You shake your head. Same old story, different summer. And then there's the miller's daughter walking by with her basket of flour, her hair covered with a rag to keep the sun off it. She nods politely. You nod back and immediately trip over a root. Smooth.by the time you reach the fields. The sun is climbing higher, and your back already feels like it's been pressed under an iron. But the work doesn't wait. Your job this morning is to turn the soil in the fallow strip near the hedgerow, maybe chase off some birds, and try not to pass out in full view of the manor steward. He patrols like a vulture in a linen coif, always ready to note who's idling. You drag the hoe behind you like it insulted your mother. Each swing sends dry dirt flying. You try to focus on a rhythm. Left swing, crunch. Right swing, crunch. Wipe sweat. Swat a gnat. Repeat. Sometimes, to beat the heat, people started even earlier, before dawn. But today, you overslept by like 5 minutes, and now you're paying the price. The sun glares down with the smug intensity of someone who knows you can't do anything about it. You long for a cloud, a breeze. A mildly annoyed crow flapping overhead would be nice. You stop for a second to stretch. Your spine pops like a dry twig. In the distance, someone's oxen groan as they pull a cart through the lane. The wheels creak, the wood baking in the heat. A child runs by barefoot, carrying a bundle of herbs and grinning like his feet aren't about to catch fire. Youth is wasted on the immune to blisters. The midday heat isn't here yet, but it's knocking at the door. You know once it hits, it'll feel like the entire sky is pressing down on your head. That's why mornings matter. This window of tolerable warmth is when most of the heavy lifting gets done. Plowing, sowing, weeding, repairing fences, it all has to happen early or not at all. Mainstream historians agree that peasant routines were shaped almost entirely by daylight and weather, not clocks. The church bell, sun position, and sheer bodily discomfort were your schedule. Time was measured in chores and sweat, and yet, the days somehow passed. Summer was cruel, but it was also harvest promise. If things didn't dry up or burst into flames, first point one quirky detail. Some farmers used to sleep in shifts, called first sleep and second sleep. You'd nap after sunset, wake in the middle of the night to pray or snack or, stare into the dark, and then go back to sleep before dawn. On days like this, you dream of naps more than you dream of heaven. Speaking of weird, there's a rooster in the next field over that crows whenever someone curses. No one knows why. Some say it's possessed. Others say it just likes drama. You finish your section of the field and lean on your hoe, panting. Your shirt is soaked. Your hair clings to your forehead, and a trickle of sweat runs down your back like a worm made of pure irritation. You take a sip from the flask on your belt. The water is tepid, tastes faintly of clay, but it's wet, so it wins. You look up and squint across the fields. Other villagers are doing the same routine, bending, pulling, pushing, swatting, sighing. It's a chorus of survival. No one says much, but there's a kind of comfort in the shared misery, like a very sweaty group hug, spread out over acres as the sun climbs higher. The colors of the world shift. Greens go dusty, browns darken. The blue sky turns a little too bright. You feel it pressing on your skin, making even the air feel like it weighs something. You've got maybe another hour before it's too hot to keep going without collapsing or hallucinating St. Cuthbert handing you a cold ale. You gather your tools and start back toward the edge of the village, feet dragging slightly, arms limp. The morning's chores are mostly done. But the heat has just begun to roar. You don't so much walk back into the village as you melt into it. Every surface radiates heat. Walls, stones, even the low wooden bench where old Wolfston is permanently parked with a mug of something suspicious. He nods as you pass, eyes squinting beneath wild white brows. You nod back, and he mutters something about back in my day and cooler summers. But no one's buying it. Not unless he means before the plague, which, fair enough. Your path takes you past the manor house. Not too close, of course, because that's where things get complicated. There's a strict social order here, and you, friend, are not high on the ladder. In fact, you're basically the ladder itself. The lord of the manor sits at the top, probably enjoying a breakfast of imported figs and smug satisfaction in the stone coolness of his solar room. Below him are the stewards, the reeve, the guy who keeps tattling on people for lazy scything, the bailiff, and then, well, everyone else. You. You might be poor, sunburnt, and possibly cursed by whatever made your cabbage wilt. But even in this low position, you've got a role. You know the land. You know the livestock. And you know that reeve is probably hiding a stash of salted pork behind his shed. The reeve, by the way, is basically the peasant manager, chosen by the villagers but expected to suck up to the lord. It's a lose-lose gig, really. He keeps records, checks the work, assigns tasks, and reports troublemakers. So yeah, no one really likes him. You glance toward his house as you pass. He's probably inside polishing his ledger with the intensity of a man who hasn't harvested a turnip in years. But the real power in a summer village? Gossip. It flows stronger than the river ever did. Who's behind on their grain quota? Who let their pigs wander into the herb patch? Who's been visiting the widow from 2 fields over? Gossip keeps the hierarchy humming when heat makes everything else grind to a halt. Even your own family's not immune. Your aunt still claims your cousin was kissed by a knight, even though everyone knows it was just the miller's son with a shiny helmet. Today's buzz is all about someone's thatch catching fire from a poorly placed lantern. Again, fire's the true enemy here. The dry grass roofs go up like parchment in a hearth. And water's not exactly easy to come by when half the stream is a puddle and the other half belongs to the cows. You spot the bailiff near the church, lecturing a group of teens on the importance of propriety, while standing directly in a puddle of goat urine. No one tells him. Maybe they're hoping he'll slip. You keep your head down and move on. You don't need that kind of attention today. There's a subtle heat hierarchy. 2. Those with access to stone buildings or shaded spaces, the manor servants, the priest, maybe the tanner, get brief relief. Everyone else? You scuttle from shadow to shadow like a lizard in a tunic. Even the animals are ranked. The Lord's hunting dogs get to lounge in the shade with buckets of water, while your donkey is chewing bark and giving you side-eye like you personally designed this heat wave. Mainstream historians agree that medieval society was rigidly structured, but with summer labor demands, there was often a kind of heat truce. That meant tasks got a little more flexible. Someone too sunstruck to finish weeding might be reassigned to shade-based work, like mending tools or, more likely, fetching things for someone else who wasn't. Of course, this assumed the reeve wasn't having a power trip. Historians still argue whether peasants had any true autonomy over their schedules, or if every hour of their day was dictated by seasonal expectations and lordly mood swings. You tend to believe it's the latter, especially when you're told to weed in the hottest patch of the village while the steward's nephews get haystack watch duty, which mostly involves lying on their backs and throwing pebbles at one another. Still, you find your small advantages, like the shaded alley between the cooper's shop and the chapel, where the wind funnels through just right, or the spot behind the beekeeper's hut where wild mint grows, and if you rub a little on your neck, it almost tricks your body into thinking it's not broiling. You head there now, just for a minute, to let your pulse slow. You lean against the cool wall and close your eyes. You can hear the village in motion, the thud of wooden mallets, the cluck of disgruntled chickens, the occasional hiss of someone stepping barefoot on a hot stone, and, from somewhere near the fields, a distant scream that definitely sounds like someone tried to grab a goose without warning it first. The air smells like sun-warmed grass, sweat, and old bread. You'd bottle it and sell it as authentic peasant cologne. If only medieval capitalism hadn't been mostly limited to cheese. Then, just as you're settling into your shady moment of bliss, someone yells your name. It's the tanner's apprentice, who always speaks like he's in a tavern brawl. They need help down by the old paddock. One of the oxen's collapsed. Great. Nothing says cool down like wrestling a half-ton animal in direct sunlight. You sigh, straighten up, and head back out into the furnace. The road bakes under your feet, heat shimmering like waves off a bonfire. You pass a group of children chasing a frog and shrieking like it's a dragon. One of them offers you a handful of something gooey and green. You politely decline to tea the paddock. The ox is slumped, sides heaving. The farmer is throwing water on its face and muttering a prayer that might be improvised. You join in to help lift its head, avoiding the hot patches of ground where the sun has turned the dirt to ash. The ox groans. You groan. Everyone groans. It's a summer symphony of suffering. Eventually, it lumbers to its feet, clearly annoyed. You give its flank a pat and stagger back. Your arms are shaking, your face is flushed, and your clothes cling like you were dunked in a pond. But you weren't. You just helped lift a 1,000-pound furnace wearing fur. And now it's close to midday. You wipe your forehead with a sleeve and glance toward the bell tower. Almost time for the break. If you can call huddling in the only shared shade between two buildings while swatting flies and gnawing on yesterday's onion pie a break. But compared to hoeing fields or wrestling livestock in this weather, it sounds heavenly. You slump into the shade like a deflated sack of grain. There's barely enough room for everyone. So knees bump, elbows poke, and the general mood is that of tired animals jammed in a barn during a thunderstorm. But no one complains. Not really. You just exist in this sliver of relief between buildings, where the heat can't quite reach and the sun can't bully you directly. You stretch your legs out and tip your head back against the stone wall, cool and slightly damp. Someone passes around a water skin that smells faintly of leather and onions. You take a swig anyway. It's warm, of course. Everything is. Even your teeth feel sun-warmed. But it's wet, and it's not crawling with things, so you count that as a win. Lunch isn't some organized mealtime with a set menu. It's more like a patchwork of whatever people brought or could scrounge up. You dig in your pouch and pull out a handful of hazelnuts, a hunk of cheese that's starting to sweat more than you are, and a thin slice of smoked fish wrapped in a wilted cabbage leaf. The combination is challenging, but it fills the corners. Someone nearby is peeling a turnip with a tiny blade. You trade half your fish for a bite. Fair is fair. You listen to the low murmur of conversation, some practical, some pure nonsense. Someone's talking about how a neighbor's cow gave birth to a two-headed calf last summer. Someone else swears there's a cool cave at the edge of the woods where the air stays cold all year round. You consider this a likely exaggeration, but still make a mental note, just in case. One man, older and missing 2 front teeth, says he remembers the summer of 31, when the sun cooked the ground so hot it burned the soles off shoes. Someone else scoffs. You never had shoes. This is bonding, medieval style. Quiet companionship born of exhaustion and shared complaints. You feel a little less alone knowing everyone else is just as miserable, sweaty, and half-melted as you are. Mainstream historians agree that midday breaks were necessary during hot seasons, not because anyone felt especially charitable, but because fainting farmhands don't harvest grain. In some areas, peasants were allowed a formal non-arum, a noon rest, but whether it was official or just common sense, you take advantage of it either way. Quirky detail. There's mention in an old record of one village using a shade rotation, literally a schedule dictating who got to rest in the best shadow under the only large tree in the area. Local legend says a couple of fistfights broke out over who jumped the queue. Imagine clocking someone because they stole your sunbreak. Very on brand for summer peasantry. Historians still argue whether these breaks were honored consistently or simply tolerated when labor output started slipping. But in a day shaped by blistering sun and unforgiving dirt, even a 20-minute pause could mean the difference between finishing your tasks or finishing you. You shift slightly and realize your tunic is damp against your back. The material, rough wool, of course, wasn't made for heat. Some folks have linen, but good luck affording that unless you find it mysteriously drying on someone else's clothesline. Your boots are too warm, your fingers stained with earth, and your face is tight from dried sweat and dust. Basically, you are one light breeze away from becoming a walking crust. The baker's boy appears, passing out a few loaves that didn't quite sell this morning. They're tough, but you gladly break off a chunk. He grins and fans himself with a piece of bark. Only 7 more hours till sunset, he says, like that's supposed to comfort anyone. Someone groans theatrically in response. A sudden clatter breaks the quiet. The village smith drops something heavy onto his cart. He's wheeling it toward the well, tools likely, or maybe just an excuse to cool his feet. His arms are black with soot and sweat, and he smells like smoke wrapped in meat. But you envy him a little. At least his forge already feels like fire, so maybe the weather's just normal to him. Children dart around the edge of the crowd, chasing a dog that may or may not be theirs. The dog, smart enough to avoid work, disappears into a shady pigsty and flops over with a groan that's weirdly human. You glance toward the sky. The sun is perched overhead, pulsing white. No clouds, no hint of wind, just that strange silence that sometimes falls in the hottest part of the day, when even the insects are too tired to buzz. Time slows down, stretches like pulled dough. You feel your heartbeat in your ears. This is when the hallucinations start. Not the dramatic kind, no flaming saints or ghostly monks, just subtle illusions. You imagine the weight of cool water poured over your head, the sound of rain on a wooden roof, the feel of winter wind down your collar. It's almost cruel how vivid it seems. You open your eyes and it's still dry, still burning. To break the heat trance. Someone starts humming a familiar tune, a harvest song that makes no sense out of season, but you all recognize it. Others join in quietly. It's off-key, a bit slow, but oddly soothing. Music, even simple, tired music, has a way of lifting the moment. A fly lands on your lip. You do not react with grace. Someone laughs. You're blessed now. Flies only visit the pure. You snort and swat it away. A neighbor shares a trick, stuffing nettles in your shoes to keep your feet cool. You're not entirely sure this isn't a prank, but your curiosity's sparked. Another swears by chewing cloves. Too bad you don't have any. You make do with a sliver of mint from your secret garden stash. It helps, if only in spirit. Eventually, the group begins to stir. There's a communal grunt as everyone remembers the work waiting for them. Shadows have shifted. The sun isn't lower, but it's slightly less unbearable. Maybe, hopefully, probably not. You stand, brushing dust from your legs, and stretch again. Joints crack like tiny drums. Someone nearby lets out a string of words that would absolutely get them fined if a priest were nearby. You nod in agreement. It's the universal language of, let's get this over with. Before you leave, one old woman hands you a strip of damp cloth soaked in lavender water. "For your neck," she says, and you almost weep with gratitude. You tie it loosely, and the coolness clings to your skin like a mercy. You step back out into the light, squinting as it pierces your eyes like needles. The break is over. The work remains. You head toward the path leading to the upper fields, tools bouncing in your arms, every step louder than it should be. And yet you keep walking, because there's no other choice. And because, somehow, so does everyone else. You're barely through the village gate before your arms start staging a quiet rebellion. Not the dramatic, falling down kind, more like a stiff, sulky protest. Your shoulders click, your palms are raw, and your hips feel like someone replaced your joints with cold porridge. You consider flopping directly into the trough beside the goats, but you'd probably drown. Instead, you lean against the wall of the bakehouse, tools clattering beside you, and try to remember how to breathe like a normal person. The sun's still hanging around like an unwanted guest, but now it's lower, lazier, casting long golden lines across the roofs and cartwheels. Chickens scurry past your boots in a chaotic blur of feathers and judgment. A couple of pigs wallow in the shallow puddle near the well. Honestly, they have the right idea that I end this late afternoon lull. The village hits a peculiar tempo. It's not as frantic as morning, not as dead as midday. It's the exhale after the strain, the beat before supper, when people scurry to wrap up the day's chores. You're not done yet either. The fields may be finished, but survival isn't a one-task game. You drag yourself toward the well. There's already a small queue because of course there is. Buckets, pots, jugs, everything lined up neatly, as if water is politely rationed by appointment. You smile faintly at the absurdity, then promptly yawn so hard your jaw cracks. When your turn comes, you lower the rope and listen for the familiar splash. The crank squeaks with each turn, and when the bucket rises, it's wet, blessedly cold, and smells faintly of moss. You gulp straight from the rim, spilling half of it down your tunic. You don't care. The dribble actually feels good. You fill your skin flask, splash some on your face, and wipe it with the corner of your sleeve. Immediate regret. Now you smell like old wool and swamp. But hey, it's an improvement. Mainstream historians agree that communal wells were central to rural life, both practically and socially. It was where you got your water, yes, but also where gossip, arguments, and marriage prospects were quietly circulated like pre-internet headlines. You overhear two women muttering about a stolen chicken, and a man fretting that the miller's apprentice has been eyeing his daughter with too much gumption. You pretend not to listen. You're very bad at pretending. But then there's this curious, fringe detail you remember hearing. In some especially hot summers, villagers would lower bundles of cheese, butter, or even meat into the well in baskets, using the cool depth as an improvised fridge. The risk of dropping your week's rations into oblivion? High. But the fear of spoiled butter on barley bread? Higher still. Historians still argue whether access to the well was rigidly controlled by custom or just sorted out through mutual understanding. Either way, everyone here knows the rules. Even if they grumble when someone accidentally cuts the line, you shuffle home. Your house, or let's call it a structure made of stuff that hasn't collapsed yet, is one of the smaller ones. Thatched roof, daub walls, door that squeaks like an offended mouse. Inside, the air is thick and musty, like warm bread left too long in a basket. But at least it's not outside. You prop open the shutter. Not for light, you're swimming in that, but for the faint illusion of air movement. A few embers still smolder in the hearth from earlier. You take your water flask and sprinkle a little over the corner of the floor near the doorway. Kicks up a puff of steam and smells faintly of ash. Cooling trick, passed down from someone's grandmother's grandmother. Doesn't do much, but hey, it's ritual. Next, firewood. You need just enough to cook something, but not enough to turn the room into a chimney. You head to the stack outside, more like a sad pile of sticks and damp bark. You gather a few in return, moving slowly, trying not to sweat more than you already are. The cooking is simple. It has to be. You drop a handful of dried peas into a small pot with water, toss in whatever herbs you scrounged earlier, mostly thyme and a suspiciously enthusiastic sprig of wild garlic, and let it simmer. There's half a lump of barley bread left from yesterday. You chew on it like a dog working a stubborn bone. You've barely started eating when someone taps on the doorframe. It's your neighbor, Tomas, holding 2 eggs and a sheepish smile. Traded for these. Figured you'd want one, he says. You nod, take the gift, and crack it into your simmering pot. The yolk clouds the water, golden and promising. This is now luxury cuisine. As you eat, slowly, savoring each bite like it's a royal feast, you think about the strange quiet of evening. No one yells, no one runs. Everyone's too tired, too heavy-limbed to do anything but exist in their space. A few songs drift in from a nearby house. Someone plucks a lyre, badly. A child giggles once, then it's back to silence. After the last spoonful, you rinse the pot with a scrap of cloth and the tiniest splash of water. You set it near the window to dry, then stretch out on the rough bedding of straw and worn blankets in the corner. Not to sleep, not yet, just to lie. You take inventory, your muscles feel like they've been pickled. Your hands are rough. Your feet are still carrying pebbles, despite your best attempts to empty your shoes earlier. You mentally curse the stone paths, then feel guilty. The stone paths aren't to blame. They're just there. Like everything else, you run a hand through your hair, sticking up in every direction. Somewhere in the back, you think a small bird might be nesting. You'll deal with it later. You hear an owl call from the woods. Distant, soft, curious. Somewhere out there, foxes are stirring. The forest becomes alive at this time of day, while your world goes still. You close your eyes for just a second, then jolt when something small crawls across your arm. Just a beetle, or a demon, too tired to tell. You flick it off and roll over, muttering a charm under your breath that's 50% old wives' tale and 50% pure nonsense. But hey, whatever works. Outside, the light continues to dim. The air cools slightly. You don't want to get up again, but you know you should check on the animals before nightfall. They depend on you after all. Just a quick walk to the pen. You sigh, swing your legs over the edge of your bedding, and stand with the grace of a collapsing tent. One more task. Then you can rest. The animal pen smells like, well, everything you'd expect when creatures with 4 legs and no concept of hygiene live in close quarters. A swirling mix of damp hay, sour manure, and something disturbingly sweet that you suspect comes from the goat. You pinch your nose instinctively, then realize it's pointless. Your hands smell worse than the pen. The goats bleat as you approach, clearly insulted that you're late for their evening inspection. You open the gate with the usual rattle of the latch, and they crowd you immediately, nosing your tunic in search of grain. One of them, a floppy-eared menace named Agnes, has learned to nip at your fingers if she doesn't get fed first. You gently bop her on the nose and hand her a handful of peas. She chews like she's judging you. The chickens, meanwhile, have taken up their usual campaign of escape. One flaps onto the fence with a proud cluck, then looks utterly confused about what to do next. You scoop her up, her claws flailing like tiny pitchforks, and place her firmly back in the coop. No one's escaping tonight, ladies. Not on your watch. It's in these small moments, smelling like the bottom of a stable, covered in hay, trying to reason with poultry, that you remember just how low the bar for excitement is, but also how much these animals mean to your survival. Each one is a walking, squawking, egg-laying insurance policy. Mainstream records confirm that medieval peasant households often relied on a small collection of livestock, typically a pig, a couple of goats, and a flock of chickens to supply protein, manure, and occasional trade goods. Goats were especially prized in the warmer months for their hardiness and their ability to produce milk even on a poor diet of scrub and weeds. You admire that. You two survive mostly on whatever you can chew and a vaguely grumpy attitude. There's also a weird historical footnote you once overheard from an old traveling friar. In parts of northern Europe, farmers believed that whispering compliments to cows made them produce richer milk. The practice was called murmuring the udders. You've tried it once. The goat headbutted you. You're not saying it didn't work, but your dignity took a permanent hit. Historians still argue whether medieval animal care was governed more by superstition than practical knowledge. Certainly, there are charms for stopping a hen from laying her eggs in secret places, chants to prevent pigs from catching summer fevers, and one truly bizarre tale of a village tying red ribbons around donkey tails to ward off heatstroke. You haven't tried that one yet. You check the troughs. Water's low. You trudge to the communal stream with 2 heavy buckets, carefully balancing them so you don't soak yourself again. The water's clearer now in the evening with less foot traffic, and you can see little fish darting beneath the surface. One pauses to stare at you. You stare back. It blinks. You blink. It swims away. You win. The trip back up the hill to the pen is a slog. Your arms are jelly, and one of the buckets has sprung a tiny leak, leaving a trail of breadcrumbs for very hydrated ants. Still, you make it, pour the water carefully into the troughs, and watch as the animals drink with the intensity of athletes finishing a marathon. You sit down in the straw and lean back, the soft rustle around you oddly soothing. The goats settle in their corner, curling their legs beneath them. The chickens roost. The pig snorts once, rolls over, and starts snoring like a retired warhorse. You smile just a little. It's not quiet, never truly quiet, but it's the kind of noise your brain starts to accept as background music. You lean your head back against the post and close your eyes. A breeze slips through the slats in the pen, stirring your hair, cooling the back of your neck. In that half-dozing moment, you wonder how people in colder lands handle this season. Is it just as hard? Or do they sit around in fur-lined chairs while servants fan them with pine branches and drop grapes into their mouths? Then you remember, peasants are peasants everywhere. Probably just different flavors of sweaty and tired. You finally gather yourself to leave the pen, latching the gate with a quiet click. You pat the goat on the head, yes, even Agnes, and head back toward your little house. You stop halfway. The sky is beginning to purple, smeared with tangerine streaks. The sun is nearly down, slipping behind the distant tree line like it's embarrassed at how rude it was earlier. Crickets are starting up their nighttime symphony. A bat flits by, chasing something invisible and probably delicious. You take a deep breath. It smells like wood smoke, hay, distant flowers, and something else. Supper, maybe, or someone's attempt at perfume using crushed mint and sheep tallow. You try not to think about that too much. Inside, your bed waits. You light a single tallow candle, which flickers lazily like it, too, is on its last legs. You undress, as much as modesty and habit allow, and collapse onto the straw mattress. Pokes you in all the wrong places, but it's better than dirt. Marginally. You tug a thin linen blanket over yourself, not for warmth, because it's still muggy as soup, but because it feels like armor against the night. You listen to the familiar creaks of the house settling, the occasional scratch of a mouse in the thatch, the low murmur of wind nudging the walls. You think about tomorrow. There will be more weeding, maybe a trip to the mill. You might finally fix the wobbly gate post. Or maybe not. Maybe you'll just survive again the way you did today. Your eyes begin to close. Not quite sleep, not yet, but the edge of it. And then, from somewhere in the dark, the unmistakable sound of a chicken doing something dramatic. You sigh. Of course. You groan softly as your feet hit the packed earth floor again. The straw still clings to your clothes, and the part of your soul that just brushed sleep grumbles like a sulky child. Outside, the chicken chaos continues. A few squawks, the flutter of wings, and something that might be clucking in Morse code. You grab the nearest object, your water flask, and lumber toward the door, half-dressed and wholly irritated. You step into the twilight, the last orange glow just barely lighting your path. The ground is cool under your soles now, a blessed contrast to the scorch of the day. As you near the coop, you spot the culprit. One particularly theatrical hen has managed to trap herself outside the pen, pacing like she's been locked out of her own party. You open the gate. She walks in like she owns the place, doesn't even make eye contact. You shut the gate behind her and lean on the fence for a moment, considering whether it's worth sleeping in the coop just so you don't have to move again. Probably not. Chickens are terrible roommates. You trudge back to the house, relatch the door, and slump once more into your makeshift bed. You tell yourself you'll stay awake for just a few more minutes, long enough to let your body cool. But before your thoughts can finish stringing themselves into something coherent, you drift. When morning arrives again, yes, again, you wake to the sound of doves cooing under the eaves and a blistering shaft of light poking you directly in the eyeball. You shield your face with your arm, sigh, and start the process all over. But today, there's a particular dread settling in your gut. Because today is laundry day. Let's be honest. Washing clothes in medieval summer heat is not refreshing. It's more like plunging your hands repeatedly into hot, gritty soup while kneeling over a splintery washboard that's been handed down since the Black Death. But it has to be done, because you currently smell like an onion wearing wool socks. You gather your linen shirt, tunic, underhose, and the grim little cloth that serves as your head wrap. There's also a square of wool that used to be white but now carries the color and texture of a toasted turnip. You grab a bar of rough soap, more sand than lather, really, and head toward the washing area near the stream. Mainstream historians agree that rural medieval people were not strangers to hygiene, even if their standards differed wildly from modern ones. Most peasants bathed regularly, once a week if they could afford the time, and laundered clothes in streams or shallow tubs. Soap was typically made from animal fat and ash, sometimes with herbs mixed in to make it smell slightly less like old bacon. You kneel on the smooth rocks by the stream and dunk your shirt in. Immediately, a puff of murk billows out like you've offended the water itself. You scrub, and then scrub more, because whatever's in this tunic may be sentient. Your arms ache, your knees ache, your spirit, it's left the building. A bee buzzes lazily past your ear. You don't flinch. You're too far gone for fear. Let it sting. You'll use the swelling as an excuse to lie down. Here's a quirky thing you remember. Some laundry practices included adding stale urine to the rinse water. Chamber lye, it was called, allegedly helped brighten whites and disinfect fabric. You've never done it, but your neighbor swears by it and insists her shirts have never smelled fresher. You nod politely and make a mental note never to borrow her towels. Historians still argue whether laundry days were regular weekly rituals or dictated more by sheer necessity, like the moment when your underclothes begin to crunch when you fold them. Most believe rural people scheduled washings around social customs or religious observances, but others argue it came down to weather and willpower. Today, for you, it's both hot enough to dry things quickly and just enough motivation to not live inside your own odor cloud. As you wring out the final piece and hang it on a crooked line between two alder trees, you catch a moment of satisfaction. The cloth flaps gently in the breeze, droplets falling like tiny diamonds. For the briefest second, it looks almost poetic. Then a goat walks up and chews one corner of your tunic, ruining everything. Again, by the time you return to the house, your arms feel longer than they used to be. You sit in the doorway, chewing on a hunk of barley bread and watching the breeze play with your laundry like it's auditioning for a romantic ballad. You're too tired to feel romantic, but it's a nice image if nothing else. You glance at your water flask. Empty, of course. Always empty. Back to the well it is. On your way, you pass the village green and notice something odd. 3 children sitting in the dirt, utterly silent, holding long pieces of string. You pause, then you see it. The strings are tied to beetles. Each child has a beetle leash, and they're watching them crawl in slow circles like very bored knights at a joust. No one speaks. It's strangely formal. You decide not to ask questions. Back at the well, a familiar figure is there. Old Marin, the village matron who knows more secrets than the priest and doesn't mind letting you know it. She eyes your dripping tunic with a smirk. "Laundry today?" she says. "No, I just like bathing my clothes." You reply, instantly regretting the sarcasm. She chuckles and returns to filling her jug. "Better to sweat in clean clothes than clean clothes in sweat," she says, which makes no sense, but you nod anyway. You're too tired to argue with metaphor. With your flask refilled, You return home and do what might be the most luxurious thing you've done all week. Dunk your feet in the wash basin. It's still full of soapy water, now tepid and vaguely milky, but it's cold enough to feel like heaven. You lean back, legs submerged, arms limp at your sides, and allow yourself exactly 2 minutes of peace. You tell yourself you've earned it. The goat thinks otherwise. She's now peeking into your window. Don't say it, don't. But you say it anyway. Agnes, please go away. She bleats and knocks over your soap. Of course. You wake up the next morning with a distinctly medieval problem. The back of your neck is sunburned, your legs itch from yesterday's brush with nettles, and your clean clothes, yes, the ones you heroically washed, are now covered in goat footprints. Again, Agnes. You stare at the hoof-marked linen like it's a personal betrayal. In a way, it is. She must have reached through the open window, or climbed something. You're not entirely convinced she isn't part cat. Still, there's no time to mourn your crushed laundry dreams. The day's already hot, and you've got a bigger concern. Repairing your wattle fence before the animals decide to liberate themselves and your garden in one glorious, crunchy rebellion. You sigh, roll up your sleeves, and get to it. Your fence, much like your patience, is held together by sticks and hope. Wattle fencing is a marvel of rustic engineering, simple but effective, made from interwoven branches stuck between vertical stakes. It doesn't scream security, but it keeps the goats out of the cabbage. Most days, you gather fresh willow switches from the grove. Your arms soon become a tangle of leafy branches and tiny scrapes. Willow's flexible, ideal for weaving, but it also seems to have a personal vendetta against your forearms. You shake off the bugs and get to work weaving new pieces into the sagging gaps. The rhythmic pattern of over-under becomes almost meditative. Almost, until you accidentally jab yourself in the eye. Historians widely agree that simple wooden structures like wattle fences were a staple of peasant architecture, used for everything from property boundaries to animal pens to privacy screens for the outhouse. Their maintenance, however, was relentless. Each storm, stray pig, or mischievous child meant another morning spent replacing what had just been repaired. You think of it as the medieval version of updating your antivirus software. Only smellier. There's an odd satisfaction in the process, though. With each new branch slotted into place, the fence seems less like a pile of sticks and more like a barrier between chaos and your carrots. You pause to stretch your back, catching a glimpse of a lizard sunbathing atop the fence post. You nod to him. He blinks, wisely not moving. A particularly weird practice once whispered by a traveling tinker crosses your mind. In some regions, people believed tucking bits of bone from a black cat into their fences would ward off lightning and evil spirits. You don't have a black cat. You do have a feather from that one chicken who hates you. Maybe that counts? Historians still debate whether protective charms like that were actually widespread or merely local superstitions passed down through oral tradition. Some scholars think the practice was rooted in ancient pagan beliefs that clung on through the Christian era, especially in remote villages. Others suggest it was just villagers having fun terrifying city folk. Regardless, your fence is now sturdy enough to handle at least one goat headbutt, maybe two. You step back, admire your handiwork, and immediately notice a weak spot. It never ends. While you're out here, you decide to tackle another summer menace: the bugs. You swat at the swarm around your face for the 10th time and curse whatever gods invented gnats. The air hums with their invisible, buzzing tyranny. You head to your stash of dried herbs inside the hut and pull out a bundle of sage and lavender, two plants that smell amazing and supposedly deter insects. You bundle them into a pouch, light a small twist of them for smoke, and let the scent waft around your doorway. It smells incredible. For 5 whole minutes, no bugs. Then the breeze shifts, and your candle gutters out. Back to swatting. You remember hearing somewhere that some farmers rubbed crushed tansy or mugwort onto their skin as a natural repellent. A fringe theory suggests they even smeared garlic-infused animal fat across exposed areas to ward off flies. You haven't tried that one, but you suspect you'd make fewer friends if you did. Maybe that's the real benefit. You spend the rest of the afternoon patching, swatting, sweating, and chasing Agnes away from the compost pile. By the time the sun starts tilting toward the trees again, You feel about 7 years older and 50 degrees warmer. You retreat into the shaded corner of your home and lower a bucket into your small cold storage pit. A clever medieval trick involving a hole in the ground lined with straw and covered with a damp cloth. Inside, you retrieve a clay jug of slightly cool buttermilk. You take a sip. It's sour, creamy, and mildly refreshing. Better than nothing. There's a knock at the doorframe. You look up and see Toma, the young shepherd from the edge of the village. He's holding a handful of bruised apples and a look that says he'd rather be anywhere else. "Trade?" he mumbles, offering the apples. You dig around and hand him a small wedge of old cheese. He nods, hands over the fruit, and disappears before you can ask if his sheep have eaten your bean plants again. You bite into an apple, soft but sweet, and for a moment you feel like royalty. Royalty with fleas, but royalty nonetheless. You sit there, chewing, watching the clouds begin to change color. Shades of peach and pale lavender drift lazily across the sky. Somewhere nearby, a lute begins to play. Probably Marin's grandson practicing again. He's bad, but earnest. You don't mind. The village is quieter in the evening, as if the whole world is slowly exhaling. Chickens cluck themselves into sleep. Dogs stretch out in patches of shadow. The breeze picks up, tugging gently at your hair, cooling the sweat behind your ears. You look down at your hands. Scratched, smudged, stained from willow bark and apple juice. You flex your fingers and feel every task you did today in your bones. There's something oddly noble about it, even if it doesn't pay well. Or at all. You stand, stretch, and walk slowly through your little plot. The fence holds. The coop is quiet. The goat is chewing something you hope is a stick. You breathe deep and feel the stillness settle in. And just when you're about to turn in, when you finally feel like maybe, just maybe, everything is under control, you hear a noise, a creak, a snap. You look toward the back gate. The fence has a new hole. Agnes looks at you, then walks through it. Of course. You're not entirely sure how you got from fixing a fence to a full-on game of medieval goat whack-a-mole. But here you are, chasing Agnes across the field, waving a stick that's less effective than you'd hoped. She's quick, surprisingly quick, and stubborn, clearly enjoying the chaos. The midday sun bakes the earth beneath your feet, making the dust rise in lazy clouds. Your shirt clings to your back, soaked with sweat and dirt. The goats have a way of turning simple tasks into full-body workouts, and you're regretting every choice that brought you to this moment. The village looks hazy through the heat waves. The thatched roofs gleam dully, and the distant church bell rings, marking the passing hour with its slow, sonorous toll. The familiar smells of wood smoke, dry grass, and something faintly metallic hang in the air. You blink and chase. You finally corner Agnes near the old oak tree by the stream. She stands defiantly, chewing on a stubborn branch and looking at you with those eyes that scream, "Catch me if you can." You crouch, trying to catch your breath, and she trots off before you can reach her. Goats are surprisingly intelligent creatures. Medieval farmers valued them not just for milk and meat, but also for their curious natures and ability to clear weeds and scrub that would otherwise choke crops. This makes them essential yet exasperating members of the farmstead family. You remember reading a peculiar medieval poem praising goats as the devils of the field, a nickname that seems entirely justified right now. The poem suggests goats were sometimes seen as troublemakers, but also symbols of resilience. You appreciate the symbolism, but your feet hurt, so resilience can wait. There's a local legend, whispered among the village elders, about a goat that once escaped and led a chase so chaotic it disrupted an entire harvest festival. No one knows if it's true, but everyone loves to tell the story, especially when they want to avoid doing chores. You chuckle, imagining Agnes as the star of that tale. Historians still debate whether medieval farmers intentionally kept goats for their spiritual significance or purely practical reasons. Some argue that goats were linked to fertility rites and pagan customs, while others insist it was all about hardiness and milk production. Either way, you're firmly on team keep the goat. As you finally catch Agnes, you notice her collar, just a rough rope tied with a knot you've been meaning to fix for weeks. You untangle it carefully, muttering a promise to do better. She bleats softly, almost apologetically, then nuzzles your hand. It's a peace offering you reluctantly accept. Back at the pen, you secure the gate with an extra piece of twine and several hopeful knots. You glance around the village. No one else seems to notice your goat troubles, or they're too polite to say anything. You smile. Misery loves company, but you'll keep this particular misery to yourself. You wipe your forehead with a sleeve, leaving a streak of dirt that looks suspiciously like war paint. You deserve it. With Agnes finally contained, you take a moment to appreciate the small victory. The sun is high, but a gentle breeze stirs the leaves overhead, offering a brief respite from the heat. You lean against the fence post, catching your breath and watching the world carry on. Nearby, the mill will turn slowly, grinding grain into flour, a sound as steady as your heartbeat. The air smells faintly of freshly baked bread from the baker's oven, mingling with the sharper scent of herbs drying in the sun. It's oddly comforting. You think about the miller, whose job depends on the seasons and the rain, and who, unlike you, doesn't have to deal with escape artists at breakfast time. Still, both of you are part of the endless cycle. Plant, tend, harvest, survive. You walk back toward your home, dirt-crusted and exhausted but satisfied. There's a simple beauty in this repetitive struggle, in the small victories that keep everything from falling apart as you sit down to rest. You catch a glimpse of the sky turning a deep, rich blue. The heat of the day slowly fades, replaced by the gentle coolness of evening. You listen to the soft chorus of crickets and the distant hoot of an owl. Night is coming, bringing relief and rest. You smile tiredly and prepare to settle down. Tomorrow will bring new challenges, no doubt, but for now, you let yourself relax. And just as you close your eyes, you hear a familiar bleat. You open one eye. Agnes is at the window again, of course. You awake to the strange but comforting smell of damp earth and wood smoke curling through the open window. The world outside your hut is still bathed in the soft, golden light of early morning, promising another blisteringly hot day. Your skin prickles with the memory of yesterday's sunburn, and the goats, ever present in your thoughts, are already stirring somewhere nearby. You push yourself up and stretch your limbs, feeling the soreness from all the fencing and chasing, but the quiet peace of dawn makes the aches more bearable. You step outside, the coolness of the morning air a brief reprieve before the day heats up again. The village slowly comes to life. The distant clatter of wooden wheels, the creaking of carts, the faint calls of vendors setting up their stalls, your thoughts drift to water. Specifically, how crucial it is to survive the summer heat. Medieval farmers faced a constant battle with thirst, not just their own, but their animals and crops too. Wells, streams, and rainwater collection were lifelines. You decide to check your own water storage, a rudimentary system of clay pots buried in shaded earth to keep the contents cooler. You dig around in the cool soil, retrieving a pot sealed with a cloth. Inside, the water is murky but drinkable. You take a careful sip, the taste earthy and faintly metallic. No surprise, given the rudimentary filtration. It's enough to quench your thirst for now, but you know you'll need more soon. Historians agree that managing water resources was one of the most critical aspects of medieval farming, especially in hot climates. Villages built wells, cisterns, and irrigation ditches, but access was often limited, and droughts could be disastrous. Some communities even employed water priests or specialists believed to influence rainfall through rituals, a blend of practicality and superstition. You think about those rituals as you tend your own small irrigation channel, diverting a trickle from the stream to your garden beds. The soil feels warm and dry beneath your fingers, begging for moisture. You splash water gently around the roots of your tomato plants, hoping to coax them through the worst of the heat. A curious memory surfaces. Some medieval farmers buried gourds or hollowed logs near their crops, filling them with water to slowly seep into the soil. A primitive drip irrigation. You're tempted to try it, but today you focus on your patchwork of canals and ditches, hoping they hold up. Nearby, the village children are playing a game involving a hoop and stick, their laughter carrying faintly through the air. It's a small, joyful distraction from the relentless sun. You smile at their carefree antics, reminding yourself that even in hard times, life finds moments of lightness. Suddenly, a shadow falls across your garden. You look up to see the village priest, holding a small bundle of herbs. He nods at you solemnly, offering the herbs with a quiet blessing. It's a gesture of goodwill and shared hope, a reminder that faith and farming often intertwined. You accept the herbs, their scent fresh and calming. The priest mentions that the herbs are for keeping away pests and, perhaps, a little spiritual protection from the sun's harshness. You thank him, realizing how much superstition and practical knowledge blend in your world. Historians still debate the extent to which religious rituals influenced agricultural practices. Some argue they were essential community glue, while others suggest they were mere echoes of older, pagan traditions that persisted quietly beneath the surface. As the sun climbs higher, you feel the heat pressing down again. You decide to retreat to the shade and rest, knowing that the afternoon will be the hardest part of the day. You lean against the cool stone wall of your hut, closing your eyes and listening to the gentle hum of the village. A faint breeze stirs the leaves above you, carrying the scent of baked bread and distant wood smoke. You breathe deeply, savoring the brief comfort before the next wave of heat. For a moment, you imagine what it would be like to live somewhere cooler, where the sun didn't scorch the earth and the air was soft and moist. But then you remind yourself, this is your life, your land. You endure because you must, because somehow you and your ancestors have always found a way, and as you rest, the world continues its slow, steady rhythm. Farmers tending fields, animals seeking shade, children playing, and the ever-present sun moving relentlessly across the sky. You smile softly, letting the sounds lull you into a calm, quiet space. The afternoon heat settles over the village like a thick blanket, heavy and unyielding. You feel it pressing against your skin as you step outside again, the sweat already pooling in the hollow of your neck. It's the kind of heat that makes the simplest tasks feel like monumental feats. Even the breeze seems to hesitate, reluctant to stir. You head toward the fields, where the sun beats mercilessly on the crops. Wheat stalks shimmer gold, swaying lazily despite the stillness in the air. You run a hand over the dry soil, noticing cracks that look like spiderwebs stretched across the earth. The plants strain, leaves curling at the edges, desperately searching for any moisture left in the ground. Today, irrigation is your priority. You follow the narrow furrows where you've tried to channel water from the nearby stream. The flow is weak, barely more than a trickle, and you realize that if this dry spell continues, your harvest could be in serious trouble. You pause to wipe your brow and glance up at the sun, its glare so bright you have to squint. There's a small, stubborn cloud far on the horizon, but it's no promise of relief, just a tease. Medieval farmers developed clever ways to conserve water and protect their crops from heat stress. You recall hearing about shade trees planted around fields to provide shelter and reduce evaporation. You wish you had the space or time to cultivate such a luxury, but your plot is too small and your hands too full. In some regions, farmers built raised beds or ridges to keep roots cooler and better aerated. You try to mimic this by gently mounding soil around your tomato plants, hoping to encourage deep root growth. It feels like gardening by guesswork, but you've learned that sometimes hope is all you have. You remember an unusual tidbit. In parts of medieval Europe, farmers would use fish or seaweed as fertilizer, both rich in nutrients and moisture retention properties. It sounds strange and smelly, but apparently quite effective. You wonder if a well-placed pile of seaweed might help your garden survive these hot days. Historians still argue whether such organic fertilizers were widespread or mainly localized to coastal communities. Some think the knowledge was passed along trade routes, while others suspect it remained a niche practice as you tend your plants. A group of villagers gathers nearby, chatting about the heat and the latest rumors. One mentions the king's court sending a new decree about drought management, though no one seems quite sure what it entails. Politics feels distant here, but the effects, water restrictions, food shortages, are very real. You find comfort in the simple tasks: watering, weeding, watching for signs of pest damage. The cicadas drone their relentless song overhead, adding a soundtrack to your afternoon. Your fingers brush against a small patch of wild herbs growing near the fence. You pick a sprig of rosemary and crush it between your fingers. The scent is sharp and invigorating, a tiny burst of freshness in the heavy air. You tuck it into your pocket, planning to use it later to flavor some stew. Nearby, a scarecrow leans slightly, its straw hat tipping forward like a tired sentinel. You think about how medieval farmers believed scarecrows could not only frighten birds but also trap mischievous spirits. Superstition and practicality intertwine again, just like that goat charm you thought about earlier. You straighten the scarecrow's hat and step back, letting the sun warm your face. Despite the challenges, there's a stubborn pride in your work. This land is hard, unforgiving, but it's yours. You glance toward the horizon, where the sun begins its slow descent, promising cooler hours ahead. For now, you'll savor the brief, sweet relief of evening. The sun slips lower, painting the sky in soft oranges and dusty pinks, a welcome change from the harsh glare of the day. You feel the heat begin to wane, replaced by a gentle coolness that seems to settle like a soft blanket over the land. It's the kind of moment that reminds you why enduring the scorching midday sun is somehow worth it. You move through your little farmstead, checking on each plant, each corner of your domain. The tomatoes seem a little perkier now, their leaves less curled, as if they've been holding their breath all day and can finally exhale. The herbs, rosemary, thyme, and a little patch of lavender, release their fragrant oils into the evening air, blending with the faint scent of damp earth and wood smoke. You pause at the chicken coop. The hens are calm, clucking softly, feathers ruffling as they settle in for the night. You scatter a handful of grain and watch as they peck contentedly. One particularly bold hen pecks at your boot, demanding more. You chuckle, bending down to give her an extra handful. It's moments like this when the world feels manageable, when the endless cycle of work and worry pauses, and you get to simply be. But you know the respite won't last. Tomorrow will bring the same heat, the same challenges, the same chase after runaway goats. Still, you're not alone. Around you, the village hums softly with life. Smoke rises from chimneys, lanterns flicker to life, and the murmur of voices drifts through the cool air. Children play tag in the fading light, their laughter a bright counterpoint to the cicadas' evening song. You remember an old story told by your grandmother about the Cooling Waters Festival, a midsummer tradition where villagers would gather to splash each other and share fresh fruit, celebrating the brief relief that evening brings. It sounds like a dream on days like this, but you appreciate the spirit behind it. A moment to savor togetherness in the face of hardship. Historians still argue about how widespread such festivals were and whether they served more as communal morale boosters or genuine ritual attempts to influence the weather. Either way, they remind you that humans have always sought comfort and connection amidst adversity. You walk back toward your hut, the gravel crunching softly beneath your feet. The sky deepens to twilight blue, stars beginning to peek out like shy spectators. A soft wind stirs the leaves, carrying whispers of night creatures awakening. Inside, you light a small candle, its flickering glow casting warm shadows. You prepare a simple supper: coarse bread, a slice of cheese, and a small stew flavored with the herbs you gathered earlier. The food is humble but satisfying, a reward for the day's labors as you eat. You reflect on the rhythms of medieval farming life, the endless cycle of toil, the fragile balance with nature, the blend of practical knowledge and superstition that guided each step. It's a dance as old as time, challenging but deeply rooted. You finish your meal and step outside once more, gazing up at the night sky now fully revealed. A vast tapestry of stars, cool and infinite. The heat is gone, replaced by a gentle chill that makes you pull your cloak tighter. You feel tired but content. Another day survived, another night to rest. The cycle continues, and you with it.s you close your eyes. You hear the soft bleat of a goat somewhere in the distance. You smile, knowing that tomorrow's adventures and misadventures await. Night deepens, and you find yourself drawn outside again, where the village is wrapped in a hushed calm that feels almost sacred. The stars pulse softly overhead, and the gentle chorus of crickets and night birds fills the cool air. It's a stark contrast to the relentless sun and sweat of the day, a reminder of how the world turns between extremes. You wander toward the communal well, its stone edges worn smooth by generations of hands. The water inside reflects the moonlight, rippling gently as you lower your bucket. There's a rhythm to this ritual, a quiet meditation in drawing water that's so vital yet so ordinary. The village wells were often the heart of social life after dark. Stories were shared, advice exchanged, and occasional gossip spilled, all while fetching the precious liquid. You think about how these moments helped knit the community together, especially when the days were long and hard. You recall a quirky fact you once heard. Some medieval wells were believed to be enchanted, protected by spirits or fairies who guarded the water's purity. People left small offerings, coins, breadcrumbs, or tiny trinkets to appease these guardians. Whether this was superstition or early environmental awareness is still a subject of debate among scholars. You chuckle quietly at the thought of leaving coins in a muddy well, but can't entirely dismiss the idea of respecting resources through ritual. After all, water is life, and in the heat, every drop counts as you head back. You notice the faint glow of fireflies weaving through the fields. Their soft lights flicker like tiny stars brought down to earth, a magical display that feels almost like nature's own lullaby. You find a quiet spot under a spreading elm tree, settling down to watch the slow dance of these glowing insects. The night feels vast, a cool sanctuary after the blistering heat. You let your thoughts wander to the rhythms of medieval life, work and rest, superstition and science, struggle and celebration. Historians still argue about how much medieval people understood about natural phenomena like fireflies or weather patterns. Some suggest they saw these wonders as signs from the divine, others as part of the natural order to be observed and respected. You close your eyes briefly, breathing in the cool night air scented with jasmine and damp grass. The sounds of the village fade into a gentle background hum, and for a moment, time seems to stretch and slow. Tomorrow will be another challenge, but for now, you rest. You think of the farmers who came before you, who endured harsher conditions with fewer comforts, and you feel a quiet kinship. The world is vast and unpredictable, but here, under this elm tree, surrounded by the soft glow of fireflies, you find a sliver of peace. The first light of dawn filters softly through your window, bringing a gentle promise after the long night. You rise slowly, muscles still aching but mind already turning toward the day ahead. The air is cool and fresh, carrying the faint scent of dew on grass and distant wood smoke. You step outside, feeling the earth cool beneath your feet. A brief reprieve before the sun climbs again. The village is stirring. Chickens clucking, smoke curling from chimneys, and the soft murmur of neighbors greeting one another. It's a quiet symphony of daily life that grounds you. Your thoughts drift to the cycle you've lived through. The relentless heat, the endless chores, the small victories and frustrations that shape each day. It's a rhythm both exhausting and deeply familiar, a dance of survival and resilience. You remember the goats, the stubborn crops, the water rituals, and the moments of rest beneath the elm tree. Each piece fits together into a mosaic of medieval farming life, complex, challenging, and profoundly human. Historians continue to debate many details of this world. The exact methods of irrigation, the role of superstition, and even how communities coped with extreme weather vary across regions and times. But what remains clear is the remarkable adaptability of these people. You feel a quiet pride in being part of that long chain, linked through centuries by soil and sweat. The struggles may be old, but the spirit is timeless. That as you prepare for the day, you pause to look back at the fields, bathed now in soft morning light. The earth awaits your care. The crops whisper their fragile hopes, and the animals depend on your steady hands. With a deep breath, you step forward, ready to meet the sun once more. Now, as the day gently fades from your mind, imagine the warmth of the sun softened to a tender glow, like a comforting embrace that slowly loosens its grip. The fields around you quiet into restful stillness, and the cool night air wraps softly, soothing every tired muscle and worn thought. Breathe in slowly, feeling the gentle rhythm of your body sinking with the earth beneath you. The faint rustle of leaves and distant call of an owl weave into a lullaby meant just for you. Here, in this moment, the worries of heat and toil dissolve into the soft shadows, leaving only calm. Remember that you carry the legacy of those who lived through the harshest days, who found small joys amidst the challenges, and whose quiet strength still whispers through the grass. You belong to that unbroken chain. Let your mind drift, slow and easy, floating on the cool breeze that carries the promise of rest. The sun has set, the goats are finally at peace, and your heart can settle into a gentle calm. Sleep well, and dream of fields kissed by morning dew, of soft earth and quiet stars, until you wake ready to greet the world once more.